In a world where people try to milk Silksong left and right, I decided to make a change. I decided to, well, still milk Silksong, but in a more creative way. I made the lace boss battle from Hollow Knight Silksong, but it's 3D.
Wait, haven't other people already done that?
Yeah, I know.
Look, here, they've made a Hollow Knight in 3D.
Yeah, okay, bro, please leave.
And see, they have already gotten millions of views. I think you're kind of...
Yeah, bro, whatever, dude, I don't care.
Milking Hollow Knight.
Leave. You already ruined it.
Ruined what?
In order to turn Hollow Knight into a 3D game, I need to take a bunch of steps. Some pretty fun, and some straight up just torture. With the first step being making a prototype. If you don't know what that means, it's basically making an early access version of your game, but you are the only player. It's a barely functional mini version of your game, where the enemy AI does nothing besides spinning it around itself. Developers make a prototype to test out their game ideas. I made a new project in my preferred game engine, Unity, which is also the engine that was used to make Silksong. And after what felt like sitting through a Marvel movie, Unity finally booted up. And for good luck, I created a bean. Then I gave this bean a head and some clothing, which turned it into Hornet, if she was rendered in a microwave. Next, it was time to program the gameplay. And since I didn't program a super versatile system, it was a relatively easy thing to do. But the main challenge here isn't the programming. In Hollow Knight, or any other platformer per se, player movement is really important. Walking, jumping, dodging, running, everything needs to be precise. And the player has to feel in control of the character. Even though my plan is to only remake the lace boss battle, I still need to keep all that in mind. And one of the things that separates a janky ass movement system from a polished one is the amount of influence the player has to their jump. And to do that, I made Hornet jump higher if you hold the jump button longer. And if you jumped but then change your mind, you can let go of the jump button to come down faster. Although I forgot to make a limit here, and you can hold the jump button to literally reach for the sky. Alright, our Netflix adaptation of Hornet can navigate around, but she still can't attack, which is like 2/3 of Silksong's entire gameplay. Dude, how many more are there? I'm pretty sure whoever made this part of the game wanted us to suffer. It was so hard, I named the footage I recorded as This F***ing Fight. So, I made another microwaved cube and put it in the game in place of Hornet's sword. Gave it some animations and using scriptable objects, which are essentially just data containers. I made her normal attack and the downward pogo. Listen, I know the game starts with the default attack being the diagonal pogo to force you to learn the crest system, but I'm saving the diagonal attack for later. Next, I made a playground level, and as the name suggests, it's a playground lookalike level with the sole purpose to test out different things about the game's mechanics, like dodging, jumping, using a grappling hook, or whatever your game has. And then the rest of the game would be built around those metrics. At this point, I usually wouldn't do this, but I know that both you and I are tired from looking at a not so smooth cylinder version of Hornet without any female attributes. And I'm sure you have stumbled upon this video before, judging by the views, where a guy teaches you how to create Hornet in Blender. And if you have watched even one of my videos before, then you probably know that I suck at 3D modeling. So that was good news to me. And using Blender, I followed along with his video on a quest to make microwaved Hornet great again. Until I came across my worst enemy. A hole. For some reason I can never find them.
Dude, knock it off.
After installing a Blender add-on that turns everything into a circle, I made a circle where Hornet's eyes will be. And then that looks like my grandma for some reason. I realized I was gonna make two separate balls for her eyes anyway, so there was really no need for that hole. And after modeling her clothes and her sword, I rigged her up, which basically means giving your model some bones, and then made some animations for her. Oh, and I also made sure she was as thick as she could get. And here she is in action. But if you take a closer look, it looks as if she's wearing a cone of some sort. And I really wanted to give her some real-time cloth simulation, because not only would I avoid making animations separately for her clothing, cloth simulation can also look pretty cool if done right. Unfortunately, I've never done this before, but thankfully, I came across this video that really did the trick, and here's how it looks like all together. I know Hornet is supposed to look angry and the fighter type, but in my game she turned out pretty cute. It's time I confront my nemesis. The thing that I was always afraid of growing up as a child, and no, it's not a Java application for. I'm talking about visual effects and shader graphs. You see, since I had a pretty shitty laptop for a long ass time, I never got to learn much about visual effects and shader graph editor in Unity, because my crippled setup could never even handle it. And I'm telling you, these two are so important. Even Virgil would not have been the reclaimer of his name if not for the visual effects and shaders that work together to shape the
You shall die.
And thanks to Gabriel, thanks to Gabriel, I was able to pull it off pretty easily. It was time to make the enemy AI. But at this point, I haven't even decided which boss battle I would like to remake. Here are some things that I should keep in mind. 1. The boss needs to be iconic. Many players should have defeated it and they should have liked it. 2. The boss's gameplay mechanics need to be transferable into a 3D game. There were many great bosses in Silksong that were challenging but would not be as challenging and fun if I made them in a 3-dimensional world. 3. Making the boss's 3D model shouldn't be that difficult, because I suck at it. And it was then that I laid eyes upon the thickest. Wait, is she 18 plus? Is she legal? Anyways, I realized Lace would be the perfect match for my game. She would be the Romeo to my Juliet. I started off by creating the microwave version of Lace, and for her AI logic, I decided to go with context steering behavior, which is just a fancy way of saying the boss looks around itself, panics, evaluates its life choices, and then picks the right direction. And it works by creating a pizza made out of invisible rays.
They are visible now for demonstration purposes.
Every couple of frames, those pizza slices check for obstacles. And if there's a way without any obstacles that close to our target, it follows in the direction of that specific pizza slice. And here's how it looks like. Goddamn, can any of you guys honestly work on the first try? Normally in close combat, people loop around themselves in a circle to keep each other at sight and avoid letting the opponent get behind them. I guess I've never done any martial arts or anything, but I suppose that's why they do it. And this applies to video games as well. I programmed some logic that basically draws 2 half circles around itself, and if the player walks into either one of them, the boss moves in the opposing direction and keeps optimal distance. This is something that does not exist in a AAA game known as Dark Souls 2. And hey, since we already have a 3D Hornet model, how about we make Lace as well? This time I made the model entirely out of my own ass. I didn't follow any tutorials. And you know how it goes from here. I made her thick, rigged her up, made some animations, and put her in the game. And it was at this time that I started questioning whether I should change the name of the channel from GameCook to Game Bakery, because look at all this cake. So here's how the enemy's attack system works. She takes a bunch of values like the distance to the player, the dot product to the player, and compares them to all the available first attacks in her attack chains. Then multiplies those numbers with a certain weight and then gives each of them a score. And at the end, performs the attack that has the best score. There is a little bit of randomization to the decision making, and to make the enemy behavior even less predictable, she can transform from one combo chain to another if 2 or more combo chains contain the same attack that she's currently performing. But she can't damage us yet, and neither can we, so what's the point? So I started off by making a blood splash effect, and if you can't notice, my entire screen is going black every time she bleeds. I made some more custom particles that are inspired from the actual Silksong. made a blink effect, and also wrote a time manager system that stops the time of the game for a split second every time you take damage. And since I was here, I decided to make the game's UI. This process was pretty straightforward and didn't really take all too long. I basically took a very close look at Silksong's UI and tried to replicate the same thing. I also made this concept UI that shows you what crest you have currently equipped. Hey, maybe you'll be able to change your crest mid-combat, who knows? So far, we can take damage, but we can't heal. And that Silk build-up UI there is currently kinda useless. Looking at Hornet, when she heals, she creates this thin rotating strain of silk around herself, and when it's fully tightened up, your masks replenish. So I made the thin silk strain, which in concept looked pretty good, but in reality ended up not looking pretty good. I even watched some tutorials to try and fix it. Nothing seemed to work, so I just covered it up using some shader graphs. Remember people, shader graphs can do anything. It was at this time that I realized the enemy can really benefit from some extra movesets. So I made some new attack animations, and here's how they work. Or rather how they not work. Well, it turns out it was an easy fix. In the actual Silksong, we can sometimes see Lace teleporting. And so I thought, what if I also make a teleportation mechanic? And I know there are some very rare instances in which she teleports in the real game, but I think I overused it a little bit. Okay, dude, enough. What? That's a bug. One of the most important things in a combat-driven game is camera. You have the greatest combo system ever made. What good would it be if the camera just decides to admire a wall texture during the fight? A good camera system is never appreciated, but if done wrong, people will hate on your game. Different games handle their camera systems differently, based on their gameplay. A slower game like Dark Souls uses the traditional third-person camera with a lock-on system that can work on one enemy at a time, while a more fast-paced hack and slash would bring the camera back to capture a wider area. In this case, the player can pretty easily jump around and dodge and navigate around, the boss can easily teleport, and because of that, I chose the multiple target camera that squeezes in a wider area. Although I'm not gonna lie, it was also easier to pull it off. Double jump. It existed in the OG Hollow Knight. It was almost impossible to entirely miss it in your playthrough, but apparently in Silksong, it was locked behind a time-based section that was presented as a freezing mechanic, therefore making me think I needed to have some anti-freezing ability to get there. Knowing that Hornet uses a pair of wings made out of silk to do her double jump, I opened up Blender, put a reference image in there, and then realized I suck at 3D modeling, so I downloaded a wing model from the internet. And all I needed to do for the double jump was writing a few simple lines of code. And I'm not kidding. Learning Unity and programming in order to make the double jump system is way easier than going through this part of the game. Oh, for f***'s sake. Oh, I'm dead, aren't I? Now I gotta do it all over again. I am not playing this game. I know that you're all tired from looking at this dull orange plane, so it's time for making the battle arena. One of the reasons I chose to remake Lace's second act boss battle was because of the environment. They used the same take a field, put white flowers on it, and now you have an iconic battle technique. And I don't know what it is about this technique that almost every single fight turns out great. But in almost all those instances, we have two pairs of balls flapping around in the wind fighting each other, while this time we have two pairs of ass cheeks. So I wrote some code that generates a flower field, grabbed myself a bunch of textures and some pipe 3D models, lowered down the polygon count to save performance, made a steampunk theme arena, baked some lights, and wait. I was playing around with the arena in hopes that something would magically fix things, until the opposite happened. From one point forward, even when I baked the lights and the light map was working properly, the scene was appearing all dark, making me ask myself,
Why isn't this working?
I even looked back at some Blender tutorials.
What's up, guy?
Anyway, the only solution that would push me through this step seemed to be my biggest fear. I've messed this up so many times before, and people are gonna be disappointed if I do that again. I had to put my nightmares behind and make a 3D model. And I was expecting things to go wrong here, especially that I had already spent 5 days just making this arena, and so far I've gotten nowhere. But it turned out not so bad. Good, even. Sure, I just slapped a bunch of textures on top of each other to make the materials, but well, things went beyond my expectations and turned out pretty good. Job done. Let's go back to the enemy AI. She has a few predictable attacks, and the player can just jump around pretty easily and freely and avoid all damage and eventually cheese the boss. Here are a bunch of things that I did to fix all that. The game has been pretty silent so far, like a certain hill I've heard of. And thankfully, almost all the Hornet and Lace's voice lines exist on YouTube. But that clearly ain't gonna cut it, so I recorded a bunch of random sounds myself as well. Generated some using Chiptone, which is a free random sound generator. Did a bunch of edits and ended up with this. Now slap in some audio reverb zone and it turned out pretty great. Every good boss battle requires a battle theme song that claps cheeks. Like for instance, when I figured out that German was faking his disabilities to park in the disabled people's parking spot, I was about to lose it until the game hit me with this. I know many people have just straight up used Christopher Larkin's music in their games or YouTube videos and got away with it. But that's not me. What if one day Mr. Larkins goes drunk and takes down all their content? Because he clearly can. But that also brings in another issue. I don't know shit about music. Like, even when I was searching the web for a fitting soundtrack, I didn't even know what to search for. Minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into days, and I still couldn't find anything. Until I came across this free Unity asset pack that I have linked in the game's page on itch.io. I know it doesn't really fit the theme, but this is the best I can do for now. With the sound effects all done and dusted, it was time I moved on to the next step. When Lace goes into her second or third phase, she does a certain move that has an area of effect. Not sure about you guys, but this looks very much like Virgil's Judgement Cut End to me, and since I really believe that it's the most badass and cool looking thing in the world, I decided to replicate it. But here's the issue. I've never seen someone do such a great job at making this effect, meaning that I'm in for a lot of frustration and disappointment and suck. I was right. It's just so difficult to replicate the same effect in Unity. I even tried ChatGPT, Claude, and none of these AIs are capable of creating the simplest shader, let alone the Judgement Cut. And there are nothing on Gabriel's channel either, so I lost all hope and gave up for now. Currently, when we drain the enemy's health, or if she claps our butt cheeks, nothing happens, and for that, I made a death animation that respawns you at the nearby bench. An intro cutscene for when the fight begins, and an outro cutscene for when you defeat Lace. But I still could not get the thoughts of the AoE attack out of my head. For all the gooning that I've done to Virgil, I owed him at least this much. So I just gave it one more try, and another, and each time I got closer to getting the effect to work right. Until
My power shall be absolute.
slap in some camera shake and the game looks incredible. I tested out the boss fight for potential bugs and imbalances, tried to fix all of them, and exported the game to see if it was optimized enough to be played on my laptop. I used to have a very shitty laptop with like the worst specs ever. And every time I make a game, to test if it runs well on all devices, I test them out on that laptop. And when I tested it this time, why is it running on like 5 FPS? Not just that, every time I look at these flowers, my frame rate drops to half. There was clearly something wrong with those flowers. And it didn't take me long to realize that it was the lighting. See, the game spawns in around 10,000 silk roses into the scene using GPU instancing, which doesn't cost much FPS, and it's what big games like Elden Ring and Far Cry do, but to make those 10,000 flowers react to light probes is pretty heavy. And I understand not that many people have a $6,000 monster PC.
This isn't actually $6,000. It's more like 1200.
So my solution was to grab a white plane, bake the lighting on it, mask it out, and then create a shader to fake the lighting, and surprise surprise, it doesn't work. So I just decided to look for any info online and pick around with magical cubes in the graph editor, and at some point it somehow worked. And we went from 90 frames per second to 160. I also made the main menu, a settings menu, and exported the game to test it out on my laptop. And even though I'm playing in a PS2 graphics kind of thing, I can still get around 40 to 50 frames per second. But hey, it's better than playing Bloodborne on a f***ing PS4 though. Oh, it feels disgusting. It's so hot and noisy. But it still makes you appreciate your PC. After almost 2 months and 2 weeks, the game is finally finished. I wanted to add the crest system and maybe even some charms like the original Hollow Knight, but this game is dying faster than my will to live. And I really need to finish this video, so my solution was to just add the diagonal pogo. In the actual Silksong, you have to position yourself in the right distance and at the right angle and do a bunch of math really fast in real time, just to mess up anyway. Now imagine the same thing but in a 3-dimensional world. It would be close to impossible to get the metrics right. So I just made a program that does all that for you. And I know this system is kind of not so useful in Silksong, and a lot of people just stick to the default Hollow Knight moveset. In a 3D game, however, this mechanic is super useful. Even to the point where you can just jump around, do the attack, and cheese the boss fight. And to balance that out, I made the attack cost 2 silk slots. And there it is, the game is finished, and it's available for download for free via the first link in the description. And since you've watched this far into the video, how about you just give it a like as well?
Get out of here.